Item Number SCP-217. Object Class Keter. Special Containment Procedures. Containment area is to be kept behind 2 reverse pressure airlocks, chemical shower sterilization, full contained atmosphere hazmat suits, and 24-hour post-interaction quarantine and testing are mandatory for all personnel entering the containment area. Should containment be breached, the blast door for the containment and research area will seal, and chemical agent ZER-217-11 will be pumped into the air. Any humans exposed to SCP-217 are to be contained and held for observation. Any items touched by those affected by SCP-217 must be sterilized. Description: SCP-217 is a virus incurable by current means with a rate of infectivity at 100%. It affects all organisms in the kingdom Animalia, and can be spread via touch or contact with bodily fluid. SCP-217 is very hardy and can survive for years outside of the host body. The progress of the infection is very slow, with some subjects going several years before manifesting any symptoms. SCP-217 alters the biochemistry of organic tissue, causing organic matter to rearrange into a form of organic metal. The processes involved with this change are not yet fully understood, but the advanced stages are well documented. The subject will begin to turn into a complex arrangement of gears and clockwork, these taking over the former biological functions. Advanced stage infection is reported to be very painful, but earlier stages are oftentimes unnoticed, with only vague feelings of confusion, insomnia, and joint stiffness. Hearts are replaced by gears and small tubes, joints by gear networks, eyes by structures not unlike primitive hand-crank film cameras, etc. SCP-217 shows first on the outside of the body in all creatures except mammals. In mammals, it first converts the internal structures before manifesting outside of the body. This can cause those infected to go very long periods of time without knowing of the infection. SCP-217 has even been shown to totally convert the inside of the body before showing any externally visible symptoms. SCP-217 has infected several major metropolitan areas in the past, most notably the mental state of those in middle to advanced stages of infection have been shown to be much diminished. Subjects respond in a repetitive fashion, are very dull and mechanical in action, are easily distracted and confused, and appear generally irritable when faced with new problems. In addition, research on a fully converted brain has Document 217-6, Notes on Symptoms. Subjects infected by SCP-217 have, at early stages, reported no major symptoms aside from increased lethargy and a general lack of emotional response. Some have reported a feeling of fluttering or moving underneath the skin, coupled with a persistent ticking noise. This noise appears to be most prominent when SCP-217 infects the shoulders, neck, and head. However, it is inaudible if recording equipment is pressed against the affected area. Initial infection of SCP-217 is, as it's already been stated, almost undetectable. As the infection advances, subjects will begin to feel a sharp tearing pain in areas that have been converted. It has been compared to a knife wound or a deep muscle tear and can persist for hours or several days, depending on both the subject and the area affected. The new Clockwork organ appears to tear and rip at tissue for a short time before becoming fully integrated and settling into the surrounding tissue, and this is believed to account for this pain. Areas infected appear to be metal, mainly brass, steel, and iron. Other substances have been reported appearing to be leather, rubber, glass, wood, or other basic materials. Despite appearances, it is purely organic material and even carries the subject's DNA. Organs and tissues affected appear more resilient than normal, carrying the same strength and density as the materials they resemble instead of normal tissue density. Areas damaged repair over time, but at a much slower rate than standard human regeneration. Damaged areas can be instantly repaired by replacing the damaged areas with new parts of the same type. Testing has shown that there are no ill effects if parts are made from normal materials such as steel, wood, or leather to replace the existing biomechanical clockworks. Most alarming, people infected with SCP-217 can continue for months or even years without being detected, With infection so easy to spread, hundreds could be affected before proper containment could be enforced. Infections appears to spread most quickly in large offices, malls, and other large concentrations of people. Note: anything or anyone suspected or confirmed to be infected with SCP-217 is not to be allowed near SCP-882.
Off the record. SCP-217 is alarmingly opportunistic and infectious concerning all eukaryotic cells, or at least with multicellular organisms. This would imply that long ago, after the split from prokaryotic to a more complex cell, that being the eukaryotic cell, the virus appears to have specialized in infection and reproduction of its own viral particles via multicellular organisms. The reasoning for this would be because if you take a look around the planet currently, it's not just one giant functional gear. Should SCP-217 have remained targeting all life, such as bacteria and multicellular organisms, it's likely you wouldn't be around to hear this and I wouldn't be around to speculate on its evolutionary pathways. Regardless, concerning this disease, it has some interesting interactions suggesting that it is a very old virus. Seeing as 217 infects only eukaryotic cells, it does in fact only affect the kingdom Animalia. This means that despite plants and fungi also being eukaryotic and multicellular, the animal cell appears to have some difference in its structuring that allows it to be shaped and molded into different components, whereas it may be something as simple as difficulty in structuring specific cells. With that said, what I believe it may come down to is simply the presence of a cell wall, confining and constraining the cell to a particular shape, whereas with animals, seeing as our cells are only housed within a plasma membrane, they could be changed and altered to differing structures. But even this would not be enough to account for what we actually see with the tissue changing into particular structures, which we will go over later in this recording. For now, however, I want to move on to the 100% infection rate. Animals are complex creatures. On the surface of our cells exist things like receptors and co-receptors. These allow for our cells to communicate with one another, import nutrients, and export protein structures, say like with antibodies of B cells. These receptors are massively important for how our entire body functions. What is most odd, however, is that the 100% infection rate across the board for all multicellular animals. Seeing as every animal has different receptors, this makes it incredibly tough for viruses to jump classes of animals. While it is entirely possible for viruses to jump within a class, present virus included on this planet, jumping from a fish to reptiles to mammals would be incredibly tough as the receptors on a cell are different for one another, and this implies that something else is happening. My hypothesis is, upon 217 entering the body, it does not rely on the usual methods of entering a cell. Instead, using the knowledge of how it jumps classes, it has likely been around and attacking animals for a long time. So I would propose that it directly attacks a cell with a piercing mechanism. This spike, as we will call it, allows it to attach itself, and rather than be brought into the cell by, say, a receptor, it really just instead makes a hole for itself, potentially either diffusing into the membrane itself or releasing the RNA coding that it has. This may also be why, again, the virus cannot infect other kingdoms such as plant or fungi, because the cell wall cannot be pierced by the mechanism it uses to attach itself to animal cells. This has appeared to ultimately render the other kingdoms immune to the virus, but unfortunately not ours. Once it has entered the body, the aspect of taking years to show the infection can be explained under the same ideas that we have seen about latent viruses. Certain viruses upon entering the body will inspire an initial immune response, liken it to a cold. But as the virus lays within our cells themselves, the body eventually believes that it's no longer under attack. And this can happen in a few ways. Again, either it is just hanging out in a cell and the body doesn't know it's there, or it is specifically breaking a piece of communication within the body so that the body never even knows it's still there. And this has been seen with things like HIV causing sickness down the line, herpes appearing, disappearing, and then reappearing sometimes with years in between outbreaks, or chickenpox that you can have as a child and then it may manifest as shingles once you become elderly or even earlier than that. Viruses can live within the body for an extremely long time, pretty much your entire life, but I also believe it is linked to how the virus itself spreads. While clearly there would be some shedding of the virus from the body, such as through the skin or bodily fluids, and this is how it's able to spread to others to maintain its 100% infection rate. But it may only be in low levels because of how successful the virus is at actually infecting anyone that it comes into contact with. There is no need to produce high levels of itself because it can exist in an environment as well in a dormant state for extended periods of time without a host. And then upon entering a host, the infection is assured. This continuation of the virus is likely completed by the building of more virus by a cell. However, there's other processes that are long-lasting and much slower. Once entering a cell, a limited amount of itself, again, may be built as not to draw the ire of the immune system, but it also may be in the nucleus itself to stop certain chemical messengers from exiting the cell to alert the body that it's under attack. And this is where the real infection will fester for years, taking control of the cytoskeleton of the cell. By its own programming, the virus is able to alter the shape and structure of the cell, which over time would start as a localized event. But as the cell undergoes mitosis and potentially infects more cells around it, it's slow, but it continues to spread, altering the shape and structure of all the cells that are around it. As it has been shown, this in turn causes the cells to become cogs and gears. For blood vessels, they would be tubes, and the heart itself to be replaced, as well as the eyes. What's most interesting is, in other classes of animals, the infections that they exhibit will be outward at first, but with mammals, it happens on the interior of the body. And this is possibly due to the type of metabolism we have being warm-blooded animals, or it could just come down to the fact that other animals have been around longer than mammals, and this infection has been with their class for longer, making mammals a sort of newcomer. Still though, one of the strange aspects is why choose to really be a machine at all? Now, this part may be a little out there, but I would have to compare it with humanity's own nanotechnology currently. If you've ever looked at a common virus, you would find geometric structures, essentially something that isn't classified as alive but almost alive, and a piece of coding that directs it. It has no other purpose than just to reproduce. That's it. But it wouldn't even really appear either to react in ways that life would. So I would propose that 217 may have been created long ago to infect life and turn it into a machine. This may have possibly benefited whatever created it, but the effects on life are undeniable. The life isn't lost, but it's structured, turned from the chaos of an organic body and into something more predictable. But with natural structures in the way such as, say, plant cell walls, the creature on the chopping block was an animal. Once entering the body, as stated previously, it may be slowly spreading through mitotic pathways of cells, changing the structure of each daughter cell over time to fit a specific slot or gear. The blood vessels become tubes, with something like the heart becoming a mechanical pump with blood being pushed through by the movement of gears. The most fascinating aspect, however, is the brain pre, during, and post-infection. During pre-infection of specifically the brain, ticking noises can be heard despite anything applied to the area not being able to hear this ticking noise that's being complained about. And this is said to be when the infection is in, say, the neck, shoulders, or head. This is actually a fairly simple thing to explain: the activation of the auditory nerves. Much like with any mechanical compression of this nerve near the vertebral column, the brain will pick up the nerves firing and create a ringing noise in the ears, as the brain is then thinking this is what the nerves are saying. It's clear that the brain is picking up these signals as the infection begins to spread to the nerves, and then they're converted, thus activating the nerves near them and creating a firing order that then reaches the brain and is interpreted. During the infection is when the brain begins to degrade. The beauty of the human mind is its ability to adapt to events and challenges around it. We, being the smartest species on the planet, understand this is what our brains do. But as always, it comes down to the pathways of firing neurons. As the brain is converted, it becomes stuck. The pathways can no longer adapt to changing demands, and as a result, this can frustrate the person. As their brain becomes increasingly stuck in a certain way of thinking, eventually it may be that they cannot even grasp new concepts and will become permanently a snapshot of connections that they were as the infection progressed. And this might explain the repeating of themselves and in general just repeating of patterns. After infection, the brain will no longer be able to form new ideas. By all standards, or at least the standard of our brains, it would really be agile by comparison to that of the afflicted. They would be slow. Not so much methodical, but taking longer to come up with the same conclusions, unable to form new ideas. So basically for animals, this may not be such a bad thing, as animal brains in some aspects are really just a one-track sort of deal. But with humans, 217 essentially robs them of their humanity by reducing their ability to think. Physically, they appear much more capable than our bodies do. While in early infection, as mentioned, the tearing sensation they feel is present, their bodies will continue to make these structures until their entire structure becomes mechanical, or at least a version of mechanical. The aspect of them being mechanical and not just organic anymore could be something as simple as just minerals that are eaten and drank every day in our foods and water continue to build up while normally being used by a cell or excreted from the body. The virus may have just reprogrammed the cell at this point to actually keep those minerals within the cell and place them within the membrane, giving the appearance of it becoming mechanical with a functional cell still underneath. As explained, as you can still find the DNA of the person, which indicates that it is still functional and still actually a human cell. Concerning resilience, however, it's sort of a double-edged sword. As experiments have shown, you can instantly heal the afflicted person of their injuries by replacing the missing piece with normal, non-organic metal. That said, the regeneration time or healing time is severely increased. But due to the fact that they can even heal at all, would indicate that there are still functional cells within their bodies and that they have not become inorganic despite the addition of this material fixing any injuries that they have acquired. SCP-217 should concern the planet more so than just the Foundation. Because of its long incubation time and no apparent surface level manifestations, it's hard to tell when an outbreak starts or even where it started, as it could have been picked up and spread. It would appear as though the virus has not mutated into a more virulent form, as if it does, there may be no good way to contain it, or even know if it's spreading until it's far too late. Currently, there are no medications to combat nor control it, which should become top priority. Slowing the progression may become something necessary in order to give already infected scientists some time to try to delay further or cure the disease. SCP-217 would, in my mind, appear to be an engineered virus as opposed to a naturally occurring one. However, it's hard to know exactly where it came about and why, without further research, it even exists. What's difficult is because of the 100% infection rate, that makes learning about it not only dangerous, but dangerously slow for how contagious the virus is and how it may be out there right now, infecting and changing those without their knowledge. So you have to ask yourself, is that lethargy at the end of a long day because it was a long day? Or is it something else?